7. Foot Apache woman feared by all met a quiet cowboy who changed her fate forever. The Apache woman was unlike anyone had ever seen. She stood taller than most men in the villages and even taller than many of the visiting cowboys who passed through the plains. People whispered about her everywhere she went. Some called her a giant, some called her a force of nature, and some simply said her name with a mixture of fear and awe. She had long, dark hair that reached her shoulders, eyes that seemed to see everything, and hands that were strong enough to do almost anything. But it was her size that made people stop in their tracks. At 7 feet tall, she moved with a grace that few could imagine, despite her height. Each step she took seemed deliberate, full of confidence, and yet there was an air of loneliness around her. People admired her skills, but most were too intimidated to get close. She lived with her family in a small Apache village at the edge of the plains. Her father had been a respected leader, and her mother was known for her wisdom and kindness. From a young age, she had grown faster than other children. By the time she was a teenager, she was already taller than most grown men. People often stared at her in awe, but their stares sometimes made her feel different, even isolated. Despite her unusual height, she was kind-hearted. She loved helping others and learning new skills, but she had learned early that her size often made others uncomfortable. Even when she offered to help with chores or tasks, people would step back, unsure how to react to someone so tall and strong. Her days were long and filled with work, but she never complained. She helped her mother gather plants and herbs from the forest, learned how to prepare food and preserve it, and practiced her skills in running, climbing, and hunting. Her father often said she had a natural gift for understanding the land. She could spot signs of animals from a distance, read the tracks in the dirt, and find water even in dry seasons. Everyone in her village relied on her abilities, though they rarely said it out loud. Some children admired her and tried to follow her around, hoping to learn from her, while adults watched with a mixture of admiration and caution. Even with her many talents, there were times when she felt the weight of being different. In the evenings, after a long day of work, she would sit by the river that ran near the village. She liked to watch the water ripple and listen to the birds singing in the trees. These quiet moments were her escape from the curious and sometimes fearful eyes of the villagers. Here, she could be herself without having to worry about what others thought. She dreamed of friends who would see her for who she really was, not just for her size or strength. She imagined walking among people without them turning away in surprise or fear. Her reputation had reached beyond the village. Traders, travelers, and even neighboring tribes had heard stories about her. Some came to see if the tales were true. They watched her move, often stopping mid-step to stare, unable to believe someone could be so tall and yet so graceful. She didn't enjoy the attention, but she had learned to accept it. Over time, she developed a quiet confidence. She knew she was different, but she also knew she had the skills and intelligence to take care of herself. She wasn't afraid of anything, and she carried herself with a strength that others could sense even from a distance. Despite her remarkable abilities, she had a gentle side that few saw. She loved caring for animals, especially the horses that roamed near the village. She had a special bond with them, and they seemed to trust her immediately. She could ride without effort, guide the horses through rough terrain, and even calm a frightened animal with a simple touch or soft word. Children in the village would sometimes sneak up to watch her work with the horses, fascinated by her calm manner and the way she seemed to communicate without speaking. Her laughter, when it came, was bright and clear, and it could lift the spirits of anyone who heard it. Still, life was not always easy. Being so tall meant she sometimes had to make special arrangements for everyday tasks. Her clothes had to be custom-made, her bed was larger than normal, and even simple things like fitting through doorways could be challenging. People in the village had learned to accommodate her needs, but she often wondered what it would be like to live in a world where she didn't stand out so much. She dreamed of a place where people would notice her for her actions, not just her size. Her father often encouraged her to embrace her uniqueness. He told her that being different was a gift, that the world needed people who could stand tall and show courage, wisdom, and kindness. He reminded her that her strength could be used to help others, and that her size was a symbol of her ability to make a difference. She took these lessons to heart. She trained herself to be strong, not just physically, but emotionally as well. She learned to control her emotions, to act with purpose, and to use her abilities responsibly. Even though she was respected and sometimes feared, she had a soft spot for small acts of kindness. She would help an elderly neighbor carry firewood, assist a child who had fallen, or share her knowledge of the forest and animals with those who asked. These small deeds made a difference in the village, and slowly people began to see her not just as a towering figure of fear, but as a capable and kind leader. Children started seeking her advice, and adults learned to trust her judgment. She was still different, but her uniqueness began to feel like a gift to the community, rather than something to be feared. Life in the village continued, and the Apache woman grew stronger and wiser with each passing year. She became a figure of legend, not because she was scary or intimidating, but because of her skill, her courage, and her kindness. Stories of her deeds were shared around campfires, passed down from one generation to the next. People spoke of her as someone who could face any challenge with courage and calm, someone who could solve problems others could not, and someone whose heart was as large as her frame. Even with all this, she never lost her longing for connection. She wanted someone who would see her as a person, not just a legend. She wanted someone who would understand her, who would treat her with respect without being afraid. She imagined meeting someone quiet, someone who could look past the tall, strong exterior and see the person inside. This wish stayed with her, like a quiet hope she carried along with her daily tasks. Every day she continued her routines, helping her family, training, and exploring the plains. Yet beneath her calm and confident exterior there was a sense of anticipation. She didn't know when or how it would happen, but she felt deep inside that her life was about to change. Something, or someone, would come along to understand her, to see her not just as the giant Apache woman feared by all, but as a human being with dreams, fears, and the desire for friendship and trust. As the sun set behind the distant hills, casting long shadows across the village, she stood on a small rise overlooking her home. Her eyes scanned the horizon, alert and thoughtful. She was strong, capable, and independent, but she also felt a quiet longing for companionship. The wind carried the distant sounds of nature, birds calling, water flowing, and leaves rustling. And in that moment, she felt a mix of pride and hope. She knew that the world outside the village was big, full of possibilities and surprises. And somewhere beyond the hills, someone might be arriving who would change her life in ways she had only dreamed of. That evening, as stars began to appear in the sky, she returned to her home, carrying firewood and checking on the animals. Her family noticed the thoughtful look in her eyes, but said nothing. They had learned to trust her instincts and respected the quiet moments she often took to reflect. Inside, she felt a sense of readiness, as if life was preparing her for something new. She didn't know what the future held, but she felt strong enough to face it. Her journey was far from over, and though she was already remarkable, she sensed that the most important part of her story was still ahead. By the time night fell, the Apache woman had finished her tasks. She sat outside her home, wrapped in a blanket, looking up at the stars. She thought about the people who feared her, the villagers who respected her, and the world beyond the plains. In her heart, she held a quiet hope that one day someone would come who could see her for who she truly was. She didn't know who that person would be, but she knew that when they arrived, her life would never be the same. And as she drifted off to sleep, she dreamed of a future where she could walk among people without fear, where her strength and uniqueness would be celebrated, and where she might finally find the friendship and understanding she longed for. The morning the quiet cowboy arrived, the village seemed different. A soft breeze moved across the plains, rustling the tall grass, and the birds seemed to pause as if sensing a new presence. The Apache woman was already awake, tending to the horses near the edge of the village. She had noticed travelers before, people passing through on their way to distant towns or hunting grounds. But there was something unusual about this man. He rode slowly, carefully, guiding a small horse alongside him. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his eyes, and his clothes were simple but clean. There was a calmness about him, a quiet strength that made him seem different from the other visitors she had seen. The villagers noticed him too. They whispered among themselves, wondering who he was and why he had come alone. Some of them had heard stories of travelers who had passed through dangerous lands, people who had faced storms, wild animals, and unexpected challenges. But this man seemed unhurried, almost as if he belonged to the plains themselves. He spoke little, and when he did, his voice was soft but clear. There was no pride, no arrogance, no attempt to impress anyone. Instead, he moved with careful thought, observing his surroundings and treating the village and its people with quiet respect. The Apache woman watched him from a distance. She had grown accustomed to people being afraid or fascinated by her size, but the cowboy did not react in either way. He did not stop in shock, he did not whisper to others, and he did not try to challenge her in any way. Instead, he carried himself with a calm presence that made her curious. She wondered who he was and why he seemed so different from everyone else. Her curiosity was not just about his behavior, but about what kind of person could remain so calm in a world full of noise, stories, and fear. As he approached the village center, he carefully led his horse to a small clearing and tied it to a post. He began to unload his belongings slowly and deliberately. The Apache woman noticed that he seemed familiar with the land. He did not stumble over the uneven ground, and he knew how to handle the horse with care. He did not demand help from anyone, but when he needed assistance, he asked politely. The villagers were watching him closely, and some began to wonder if he might be someone the Apache woman should meet. Finally, the moment came. The Apache woman walked toward him, her tall figure casting a long shadow on the ground. She moved with the same confidence that had made her so respected in the village, but there was a quiet curiosity in her eyes. The cowboy looked up at her, and for a moment they simply regarded each other. There was no fear, no hesitation, no judgment, just a sense of mutual recognition. He tipped his hat slightly and offered a small, friendly smile. She returned the gesture, her own smile subtle but warm. In that instant, something unspoken passed between them, a feeling that they might understand each other in ways that others could not. Their first conversation was simple. The cowboy introduced himself quietly, explaining that he had been traveling for many days and was looking for a place to rest. He asked about the village, the surrounding land, and the people who lived there. The Apache woman answered him with honesty, sharing details about the daily life of the village, the animals, and the routines they followed. She noticed that he listened carefully, not interrupting, and never assuming that he already knew the answers. He asked thoughtful questions, not out of curiosity alone, but because he genuinely wanted to understand. Over the next few days, they saw each other often. The cowboy helped with small tasks around the village, carrying water, assisting with repairs, and guiding his horse safely. He did not boast about his skills or try to show off. Instead, he quietly observed the village, learning how things worked and offering help where it was needed. The Apache woman found herself drawn to his presence. He did not treat her differently because of her size or reputation. He did not step back in fear, nor did he try to test her strength. Instead, he treated her as an equal, and that respect was something she had rarely experienced. Children in the village were fascinated by the two of them. They watched as the Apache woman demonstrated her skills, running swiftly, climbing trees, and guiding horses. They also observed the cowboy's patience and gentleness. He would kneel to speak to the smallest child, help them understand the animals, and share small lessons about the land. The children learned quickly that there was much to admire in both of them, one for strength and courage, the other for calmness and understanding. The Apache woman noticed how the cowboy's quiet nature complemented her own energy, and she began to enjoy his company in ways that surprised her. One afternoon, while walking near a small stream outside the village, the Apache woman and the cowboy shared a longer conversation. They spoke about their lives, the challenges they had faced, and the lessons they had learned. She told him about the loneliness of being different, about the fear and respect her size inspired in others, and about the desire she had for companionship and understanding. He listened without judgment, occasionally nodding, occasionally asking a question to clarify. When he spoke of his own travels, he shared stories of the people he had met and the lessons he had learned from them. She realized that he too valued kindness, patience, and understanding above all else. Their bond grew quietly but steadily. They did not rush, and there were no grand gestures or dramatic events. Instead, it was the small things, The shared laughter when a horse got startled, the thoughtful silence as they watched the sunset over the plains, and the mutual respect that grew stronger with each day. She began to trust him in ways she had not trusted anyone before. His presence made her feel calm, safe, and understood. For the first time in many years, she did not feel the weight of fear or expectation pressing on her shoulders. The villagers noticed the change as well. Some were curious, others cautious. They had never seen the Apache woman interact with anyone in such a relaxed manner. Her posture softened slightly when she was with the cowboy, her expressions warmer, her movements less guarded. The cowboy did not draw attention to himself, but his quiet respect seemed to allow her to lower her defenses. People began to see that the giant Apache woman, feared by many, could also show kindness, patience, and gentleness. This was a side of her that few had ever seen before, and it sparked new conversations among the villagers about strength, respect, and understanding.
One evening, they worked together to repair a fence near the edge of the village. She carried the heavier posts with ease, while he carefully aligned them and secured the structure.
As they worked side by side, they spoke little, yet there was a sense of teamwork and connection. She realized that she valued his steadiness as much as her own strength. His calm approach balanced her energy, and she found herself looking forward to these shared moments. The work was practical, but it became a symbol of something deeper, a partnership based on trust, respect, and shared effort. Over the following weeks, their friendship continued to grow. The Apache woman began to share more about her life, her dreams, and her hopes for the future. The cowboy listened and shared his own thoughts, teaching her lessons he had learned on the road: patience, observation, and the importance of kindness. He never tried to change her or make her smaller in any way. Instead, he accepted her fully, and in doing so, he gave her the freedom to be herself. This freedom was something she had rarely experienced, and it made their bond all the more meaningful. By the time autumn arrived, the relationship between the Apache woman and the cowboy had become a part of daily life. Villagers who had once feared her now watched with quiet admiration as the two moved together, helping, learning, and sharing moments of laughter. The cowboy's quiet presence gave her confidence in a new way. She still carried her strength, but now she carried it alongside someone who valued her, understood her, and treated her as an equal. Even when they were apart, they thought of each other. She would notice his horse tracks leading toward the village and smile quietly. He would pause on his travels, remembering her guidance and the lessons she had taught him about the land. Each had found a companion who understood the other in ways that others could not. The Apache woman realized that her wish for understanding and friendship was slowly coming true. She had found someone who could see past her size and reputation and recognize the person she truly was inside. By winter, the bond between them was strong but still quiet. They did not need grand declarations or dramatic events to prove their connection. It was the small moments, shared work, thoughtful conversations, mutual respect that defined their friendship. The Apache woman began to feel hope for the future, a sense that life could be different than it had been before. She was still strong, still remarkable, still the woman feared and admired by many, but now she was also seen as someone who could love, trust, and be understood. As the snow began to fall lightly on the plains, she watched him guide his horse through the soft white landscape. She felt a sense of calm she had never known before. The quiet cowboy had arrived like a gentle wind, not changing her, but allowing her to grow in new ways. Their first encounters, full of curiosity and mutual respect, had blossomed into a bond that promised new adventures, shared moments, and a life forever changed. She did not know what the future held, but she felt ready to face it, knowing she was no longer alone. As the weeks passed, the bond between the Apache woman and the quiet cowboy grew stronger. Their friendship was no longer about first impressions or curiosity. It had transformed into something deeper, built on trust, understanding, and a shared appreciation for the world around them. Every day they found new ways to spend time together, learning from each other and discovering small joys that made life in the village feel brighter. In the mornings, she would rise early and tend to the animals, and he would often accompany her. He had a gentle way with the horses that complemented her strength. She could lift heavy buckets of water, repair broken fences, and guide the horses through difficult terrain, while he would observe carefully, offering suggestions when necessary. Together, they formed a team that worked naturally and efficiently. Sometimes she would laugh softly when he took extra care to avoid spilling a bucket, or when he spoke to a skittish horse as if it were a person. She appreciated his patience and the way he approached each task with thoughtfulness. Their conversations grew longer and more personal. On quiet afternoons, they would walk together along the river that flowed near the village. She told him stories of her childhood, the games she played, the lessons her parents had taught her, and the moments when she had felt most alone. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he wanted to understand not just her experiences but her feelings. In return, he shared his own stories of travel, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned about patience, respect, and seeing the world with care. These conversations were simple, but they carried a sense of closeness and trust that neither had expected. One day, while walking along a trail that led into the hills, they came across a group of children trying to build a small bridge across a stream. The bridge was unstable, and the children were struggling to carry heavy logs. The Apache woman stepped forward immediately, lifting the heaviest logs and placing them carefully. The cowboy, standing beside her, offered guidance and encouragement. Together, they helped the children finish the bridge safely. The children cheered, and the Apache woman felt a warmth in her heart. She realized that her strength could be used not only for herself or her family, but also to help others, especially when combined with patience and understanding. The cowboy had a way of noticing details that others overlooked. He observed the way the wind shifted in the plains, the patterns of the clouds, and even the subtle changes in the behavior of the animals. He shared these observations with her, teaching her to pay attention to small signs that could make a big difference in daily life. She found his quiet wisdom fascinating. She had always been strong and capable, but he showed her that there was more to life than just physical ability. There was awareness, thoughtfulness, and calm observation. Their bond was not without challenges. There were moments when they disagreed or misunderstood each other. Once, while repairing a fence, the Apache woman suggested a faster method to move the wooden posts, but the cowboy gently reminded her that patience and precision would make the fence stronger. At first, she felt frustrated, but she quickly realized that he was right. She learned to balance her strength with careful thought, and he learned to appreciate her energy and decisiveness. These small lessons became part of their growing understanding of each other. Evenings became a time for reflection and quiet companionship. They would sit together on a hill overlooking the village, watching the sunset and the sky turn shades of orange, pink, and purple. The Apache woman often spoke about her dreams of adventure, of exploring distant lands, and of finding a place where she could be fully accepted. The cowboy listened, sometimes offering gentle encouragement, sometimes simply sitting in silence. The silence was comfortable, not awkward. It was a shared space where words were not always necessary, and yet understanding passed between them naturally. The Apache woman began to notice changes within herself. She felt lighter, more confident, and more open to the world around her. Her interactions with others in the village became warmer. She smiled more freely, laughed more often, and even shared small lessons with the children and adults alike. The cowboy's presence had shown her that strength was not only about physical ability, it was also about emotional resilience, kindness, and patience. She began to see herself in a new light, not just as the giant woman feared by all, but as a leader, a helper, and a friend. One afternoon, they decided to explore a part of the hills that neither had visited before. The trail was narrow and the terrain was uneven, but the Apache woman moved with ease, guiding the way. The cowboy followed carefully, offering support when needed. Along the trail, they found a small grove of trees with a clear view of the valley below. They sat in the shade, sharing a simple meal and talking about the future. She spoke about the possibility of teaching the younger children new skills, about helping the village prepare for the coming seasons, and about finding ways to strengthen the bonds between families. He encouraged her ideas, showing that he valued not only her strength, but also her vision and intelligence. Their shared moments were not always about work or serious conversation. Sometimes they simply enjoyed each other's company in silence. They watched the birds, listened to the wind, or noticed the way sunlight filtered through the leaves. These moments taught the Apache woman that friendship could be quiet and steady. not always loud or dramatic. She began to understand that trust and respect could grow slowly, nurtured by small acts of kindness and consistent support. The cowboy had shown her that relationships did not have to be rushed or forced. They could grow naturally, like the trees around them. The villagers began to take notice of the changes in the Apache woman. Some were surprised to see her laughing with the cowboy, sharing stories or gently guiding the children. Others were curious about how she had become so calm and confident, even in situations that might have previously stressed her. They saw that the cowboy had a positive influence, not by changing her, but by treating her as an equal and encouraging her to use her strength and intelligence in new ways.
Over time, their partnership became an example of respect, patience, and understanding for the entire village. One morning, a small group of travelers arrived at the village, seeking guidance and shelter.
The Apache woman and the cowboy worked together to help them, showing them where to find water, how to care for their animals, and how to navigate the land safely. She noticed that the travelers were initially hesitant to approach her, but the cowboy's calm presence seemed to reassure them. By the end of the day, the travelers had developed respect and trust for her as well. She realized that her strength, combined with his patience and thoughtfulness, created a balance that could inspire others and build connections. The Apache woman and the cowboy also shared personal lessons. She taught him about the plants, herbs, and animals of the plains, showing him which herbs could be used for medicine, which plants could provide food, and how to understand animal behavior. He, in turn, taught her small lessons about observation, problem-solving, and approaching life with careful attention. She found that learning from him helped her grow not only in skill but also in perspective. Their friendship was a continuous exchange of knowledge, respect, and mutual support. As winter approached, the bond between them felt stronger than ever. The Apache woman found herself thinking about him throughout the day, wondering what he might be doing, hoping he was safe, and feeling grateful for his presence. She realized that she valued not just his guidance or companionship, but also the way he accepted her fully. He did not fear her size or reputation. He saw her as she truly was, a person of strength, kindness, and intelligence. This understanding filled her with a quiet happiness she had never known before.
Even in the coldest days, they found ways to share moments of warmth. They would sit by a fire in the evenings, discussing plans for the village, telling stories, or simply enjoying the crackling flames in silence.
The Apache woman realized that her life had changed because of his presence. She no longer felt the constant weight of fear or expectation. She had found someone who valued her as a person, who encouraged her to grow, and who offered companionship without conditions or demands. Through all these experiences, the Apache woman discovered that strength was not only measured by size or ability, but also by patience, understanding, and emotional resilience. The cowboy's quiet guidance helped her recognize that true courage was about being open to growth, accepting help when needed, and valuing the relationships around her. She began to see that the world was full of possibilities and that life could be shared in meaningful ways with people who truly cared. By the time the first snow covered the plains, their friendship had become an unspoken partnership. They worked, learned, and explored together, complementing each other in ways that felt natural. The Apache woman no longer felt alone, and the cowboy had found a companion whose courage and wisdom inspired him. Together they showed that respect, trust, and quiet understanding could create bonds stronger than fear, rumor, or reputation. The Apache woman looked at the snowy landscape and smiled softly. She thought of the journey she had taken, from being a figure feared by many to finding someone who truly understood her. She realized that her strength, once a source of distance between herself and others, could now be part of a shared life filled with trust, respect, and quiet joy. She had grown not only in skill and confidence, but in heart and understanding. And as she watched the cowboy carefully guide his horse along the snow-covered path, she felt certain that their lives were intertwined in ways that would continue to bring hope, learning, and friendship into the future. Winter had settled across the plains, covering the village in a soft blanket of snow. The days were shorter, and the mornings were crisp, with frost glinting in the sunlight. Life in the village continued, but the Apache woman and the quiet cowboy noticed that the cold brought new challenges. Paths were slippery, animals needed extra care, and the villagers had to work harder to gather firewood and keep warm. Even with these difficulties, the pair worked side by side, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. The snow made their movements slower, but it also created opportunities for shared effort, laughter, and learning. One morning, as they walked to the edge of the village to check the animals, they noticed that one of the horses had wandered off.
It had followed a distant trail into the woods, leaving hoofprints in the fresh snow.
The Apache woman's eyes narrowed as she studied the tracks, moving quickly but carefully through the snow. The cowboy followed close behind, supporting her and helping navigate tricky patches of ice.
The horse was not far, but the trail led through denser trees and small hills, making it a challenge to recover it. The villagers watched from a distance, impressed at how naturally the Apache woman handled the situation.
As they moved through the woods, the Apache woman demonstrated her skill and patience. She followed the tracks closely, noticing tiny details, the broken twig here, the direction of disturbed leaves there. The cowboy watched and learned from her, occasionally pointing out patterns in the snow or changes in the animal tracks that she might not have seen. Their teamwork was quiet but effective, a combination of her strength and intuition with his careful observation. By the time they reached a small clearing, they had found the horse grazing calmly near a cluster of pine trees. The Apache woman smiled, and the cowboy mirrored her relief. Together, they guided the horse back toward the village, ensuring it returned safely without causing alarm. This small adventure highlighted a lesson that would soon prove far more important. A few days later, a strong windstorm approached the village. The skies darkened quickly, and the villagers could feel the cold air pressing down on them. The Apache woman and the cowboy were outside when the first gusts arrived, checking the animals and securing supplies. They realized that the storm would intensify, bringing snow and ice that could make travel dangerous and daily life difficult. The villagers began preparing as best they could, stacking wood, reinforcing fences, and bringing animals into shelter. The storm arrived faster and stronger than anyone expected.
The wind howled through the trees and snow fell heavily, covering the ground in white. Visibility was low, and some of the villagers were struggling to secure their homes and animals.
The Apache woman moved quickly, helping neighbors carry firewood, checking on the smaller animals and guiding children to safety. She was tireless, moving through the snow with a calm determination that inspired the villagers to continue their efforts. The cowboy stayed close, offering support wherever it was needed. His quiet presence helped those around him feel reassured, and his careful attention to the storm's progress kept everyone informed and safe. During the height of the storm, the Apache woman and the cowboy noticed that one of the larger animals, a cow, was missing. Its tracks led into a small forested area where the snow was thick and the wind was biting.
The villagers were worried, knowing that the animal could get lost or injured.
The Apache woman volunteered to retrieve it, and the cowboy immediately offered to accompany her. The journey was difficult. Snow covered the ground unevenly, branches bent under the weight of ice, and the wind made it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. But they moved steadily, trusting each other's skills and instincts. As they walked, the Apache woman relied on her knowledge of the land. She noticed subtle signs of the cow's passage: flattened snow, bent branches, and scattered footprints. The cowboy helped by steadying her when she had to climb over logs or cross slippery patches. They communicated with gestures and quiet words, conserving their energy while staying alert. At one point, the cow became startled and moved into a shallow ditch. The Apache woman approached carefully, using calm, gentle movements she had learned with the horses. The cowboy assisted, ensuring that her strength was used efficiently without causing stress to the animal. Together, they guided the cow safely back to the village. The villagers watched from a distance, filled with admiration and respect.
They had always trusted the Apache woman, but now they could see how her abilities, combined with the quiet cowboy's support, created a balance that benefited everyone. It was not just strength or skill alone that made her remarkable. It was her ability to lead, to remain calm under pressure, and to work alongside someone she trusted.
The cowboy, in turn, showed that patience, thoughtfulness, and a steady presence could have a powerful effect when paired with courage and determination. After the storm passed, the Apache woman and the cowboy took a moment to rest. They found a small area sheltered by trees where the snow had not accumulated as heavily. Sitting together, they shared a simple meal of bread and dried fruit, warming themselves with small gestures of care.
The Apache woman reflected on how the challenge of the storm had brought them even closer. She realized that trust was not just built in calm moments but also in times of difficulty. The cowboy had shown her that true friendship could provide support without judgment, encouragement without pressure, and understanding without words. As the days continued, they worked with the villagers to repair minor damages caused by the storm. Broken fences were fixed, paths were cleared, and animals were cared for. The Apache woman's leadership became more evident as she organized efforts, delegating tasks according to each person's strengths. The cowboy assisted, quietly guiding those who needed help and offering solutions when problems arose. The village became more cohesive as a result of their combined efforts, and the Apache woman began to feel a sense of pride and accomplishment that went beyond her own abilities. She was not only strong, but she could inspire and lead others in ways that created real change. One afternoon, while checking on the storage of food and supplies, the Apache woman and the cowboy noticed that the strong winds had shifted some of the stacked firewood, making it unsafe for immediate use.
They carefully rebuilt the stacks together, talking about the importance of planning ahead and preparing for unexpected events. She realized that while she had always relied on her own strength, the cowboy had taught her the value of foresight, patience, and thinking ahead.
These lessons were small but meaningful, shaping her into someone who could handle challenges not only with physical skill but with wisdom and careful planning. Even during moments of rest, their friendship deepened. They would sit quietly by the fire, sharing stories from the past, talking about hopes for the future, or simply enjoying the warmth and comfort of being together. She began to understand that companionship was not always about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It could be steady, quiet, and consistent. She appreciated the calm influence he had on her life, helping her balance her strength with patience and thoughtfulness.
In return, he valued her courage, determination, and the kindness she showed to everyone around her. Through these experiences, the Apache woman also began to see changes in herself.
She realized that challenges, while difficult, could be opportunities to grow. She learned that relying on someone else's strengths did not make her weaker, it made her stronger. The cowboy had shown her that partnership, trust, and understanding could enhance her own abilities and create outcomes that neither could achieve alone. She began to feel a sense of balance she had never known before, where strength and patience, courage and wisdom worked together in harmony. As winter continued, the Apache woman and the cowboy became more than friends. They became partners in daily life and in facing challenges. The villagers saw them working together, learned from their example, and began to understand that strength was not only physical but also emotional and intellectual. Their combined efforts showed the power of cooperation, respect, and trust. The Apache woman realized that she had grown in ways she had never imagined. She was still remarkable, still the tall and strong figure the village admired, but now she had a partner who complemented her abilities and helped her see the world in a new way.
By the time the first clear skies of spring began to appear, the Apache woman felt a renewed sense of confidence and hope. She had faced challenges she could not have handled alone, learned lessons that strengthened her mind as well as her body, and built a bond with someone who valued her completely.
She understood that life would continue to bring obstacles, but she now had the knowledge, patience, and support to face them. The cowboy had shown her that strength was not only measured by action, but by wisdom, understanding, and the ability to work alongside others toward a shared goal. Looking across the snow-covered plains one evening, she felt a sense of accomplishment. The storm had tested her courage, her patience, and her leadership. She had proven to herself and to the village that she could overcome difficulties, care for others, and maintain calm under pressure. But more than that, she had discovered the power of partnership and trust. The quiet cowboy had changed not only how others saw her, but how she saw herself. She was no longer alone in facing life's challenges. She had someone who would walk beside her, offering guidance, support, and understanding whenever it was needed.
In that moment, the Apache woman realized that life's challenges were not only tests, but opportunities.
Opportunities to grow, to learn, and to deepen connections with those she trusted. She understood that courage alone was not enough. It needed to be paired with patience, wisdom, and care.
The quiet cowboy had taught her that strength could be gentle and that gentleness could be strong. Together they had turned a difficult season into a time of growth, understanding, and connection, a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life. Spring had returned to the plains, painting the village with soft shades of green and bright flowers. The snow had melted, leaving fresh streams of water flowing gently through the fields.
Birds returned from their winter journeys, filling the air with cheerful songs. Life felt renewed, and the Apache woman noticed the change in herself as well. She no longer carried the quiet weight of loneliness she had felt for so long. Her days were filled with purpose, companionship, and the comforting knowledge that she had someone by her side who understood her completely. The quiet cowboy had become more than a friend. He was a steady presence in her life. Every morning, they would rise together to tend the animals and check the fields. They worked side by side, effortlessly combining her strength and his careful attention. Where she moved with energy and determination, he added patience and observation. Their teamwork was seamless, a dance of complementary skills that amazed the villagers. People began to notice that the Apache woman was not just strong and capable, but also calm, thoughtful, and approachable in a way they had never seen before. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, she walked to the edge of the village with the cowboy to inspect the newly planted crops. The soil was soft and damp from the melted snow, and tiny green shoots were peeking through the earth. She smiled as she examined the rows, imagining the food they would provide in the months to come. The cowboy stood beside her, quietly pointing out areas where the soil could be improved or suggesting ways to conserve water. She listened carefully, realizing that his knowledge of the land complemented her own experience perfectly. Together, they were creating something that would benefit the entire village. The Apache woman had grown in confidence since the arrival of the cowboy. She began to take on more responsibilities in the village, teaching the children about the plants, animals, and skills they would need to survive and thrive. She shared lessons she had learned from her parents, from her own experiences, and from her time working with the cowboy. The children were captivated by her stories and demonstrations, eager to learn from someone so strong, wise, and caring. The villagers watched in admiration as she guided the next generation with patience and kindness, shaping a future that was brighter than before. The cowboy also continued to grow through their partnership. He learned from the Apache woman's courage and decisiveness, gaining confidence in his own abilities. He became more comfortable leading when necessary, sharing his knowledge of observation, planning, and problem-solving. Together, they were not only supporting each other but also inspiring those around them. The villagers began to rely on both of them, seeing how their combined strengths made life smoother, safer, and more organized. Where once the Apache woman had been feared, she was now respected, admired, and loved by many. Their friendship blossomed into something deeper as they spent more time together. The Apache woman found herself sharing her hopes and dreams more openly than ever before. She spoke of traveling beyond the plains, exploring new lands, and learning new skills. The cowboy encouraged her, reminding her that strength, courage, and careful planning could help her achieve anything she wished. In return, he shared his own dreams, his past experiences, and his hopes for a peaceful, meaningful life. They found comfort in each other's company, appreciating the quiet understanding and trust that had grown between them. One afternoon, while tending to the animals, the Apache woman paused to reflect on how far her life had come. She remembered the years of solitude, the moments when her size made her feel isolated, and the longing she had felt for someone who could see her for who she truly was. Now, with the cowboy by her side, those feelings of loneliness were replaced by companionship and understanding. She realized that the greatest change in her life was not just the arrival of a friend, but the way that friendship had allowed her to grow, embrace her strength, and open her heart to trust and care. The villagers noticed the change as well. They no longer spoke of her with fear or awe alone. Instead, they admired her wisdom, her patience, and her ability to guide others. She had become a leader in a new sense, one who combined strength with compassion, courage with understanding, and skill with patience. The cowboy's presence had helped her discover these qualities, but it had also allowed her to recognize them in herself.
She had learned that being strong did not mean being alone. It meant using her abilities to help others, while also allowing herself to accept support and companionship. Together, they organized community activities that brought the villagers closer.
They taught children how to care for the animals, plant crops, and understand the changing seasons. They encouraged adults to work together, share knowledge, and plan for the future. The village became more connected, more resilient, and more harmonious. The Apache woman's reputation transformed completely.
No longer was she feared as a giant figure. She was celebrated as a wise, capable, and kind leader.
And the cowboy, quietly by her side, became a trusted advisor, teacher, and friend to all.
One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the Apache woman and the cowboy walked to a hill overlooking the village. They stood together in silence, taking in the view. She reflected on her journey, the years of solitude, the challenges she had faced, and the arrival of someone who had changed her life forever. The cowboy's presence beside her felt natural and comforting. She realized that she had not only found companionship but also a partnership based on mutual respect, understanding, and trust. It was a bond that could weather any challenge, celebrate every success, and grow stronger with time. The quiet moments they shared became some of the most meaningful. They would watch the stars appear in the sky, listen to the rustling of leaves, or simply enjoy the peace of being together. In these times, the Apache woman felt truly seen and understood. She no longer had to carry the weight of fear, expectation, or loneliness. The cowboy had helped her recognize that strength, courage, and kindness could coexist, and that sharing life with someone who respected her did not diminish her abilities, it enhanced them. Her life, once defined by solitude and fear, was now full of joy, connection, and purpose. She could laugh freely, lead confidently, and care for others without hesitation. The cowboy had shown her that love, trust, and partnership were not weaknesses but strengths in themselves. He had helped her see that her life could be shared in meaningful ways, and that her strength could inspire and protect, not intimidate. Together, they created a life that balanced independence with companionship, courage with patience, and leadership with understanding. In the months that followed, they continued to grow together. They explored the plains, discovered new areas of the forest, and learned more about the animals and plants around them. They celebrated small successes in the village, helped neighbors in need, and shared stories of their travels and experiences. The Apache woman found that she enjoyed teaching and guiding others as much as she enjoyed learning from the cowboy. Together, they became a source of inspiration for the entire community, showing that partnership, respect, and care could change lives in profound ways. By the time summer arrived, the Apache woman felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. Her strength, once a source of fear, had become a symbol of courage and capability. Her wisdom, patience, and kindness were celebrated, and her partnership with the cowboy brought balance and harmony to her life. The villagers looked to them as examples of what could be achieved when trust, respect, and cooperation were at the center of relationships. She realized that life's greatest gifts were not just physical abilities or knowledge, but the connections we make with those who see and value us for who we truly are. One quiet evening, as the sun cast long shadows over the plains, the Apache woman reflected on her journey. She remembered the years of solitude, the challenges of being different, and the longing she had felt for understanding and companionship. Now, with the quiet cowboy by her side, she had found all that and more. She had discovered friendship, trust, love, and a sense of purpose that extended beyond herself. She understood that life was richer when shared, and that true strength included the ability to connect, care, and inspire others. The cowboy, standing quietly beside her, shared the view in comfortable silence. There was no need for words. Their bond was evident in their shared presence, the ease of their movements, and the mutual respect that defined their relationship. The Apache woman felt a deep sense of gratitude and peace. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but she also knew that with this partnership she could face them with courage, wisdom, and confidence. She was no longer alone, and she had found someone who truly valued her for all that she was. In the years that followed, the Apache woman and the quiet cowboy continued to grow, learn, and support each other. They became mentors, friends, and leaders within the village. The children learned from their example, the adults respected their guidance, and the entire community flourished under the quiet strength and wisdom they shared. The Apache woman's story, once of fear and isolation, had transformed into a story of growth, partnership, and lasting impact. And through it all, she knew that her life had been forever changed by the arrival of someone who saw her not just as a giant or a legend, but as a person deserving of respect, friendship, and trust. As the sun set, on another beautiful day, the Apache woman and the cowboy walked together along the plains, their hearts full of hope and their spirits intertwined. She felt a quiet joy knowing that the journey that had begun with fear and loneliness had led her to a life of meaning, companionship, and shared purpose.
The plain stretched out before them, wide and open, filled with endless possibilities.
Together, they faced the horizon, ready for whatever adventures and challenges life might bring, knowing that they had each other, and that, in the end, that was the greatest gift of all.